يجب أن يستقيل في الساعات القادمة 20 أكتوبر 2020.
Good afternoon. You are watching the English newscast on Future Television, live in Beirut. I'm Linda Tamim, and these are today's headlines. Families of the 25 captive Lebanese servicemen welcomed the support of the Future movement, saying they were prepared to travel to Saudi Arabia to meet with former Prime Minister Saad Hariri. The cabinet convenes in the absence of 4 key ministers in a session not expected to produce any decision on controversial files, including the licensing of new faculties, telecom and waste. And Palestinian leader Mahmoud Abbas says he supports further negotiations over a draft resolution on ending Israel's occupation of Palestinian lands submitted by Jordan to the UN Security Council for possible vote. Families of the 25 captive Lebanese servicemen have welcomed the support of the Future movement, saying they were prepared to travel outside of Lebanon to meet with former Prime Minister Saad Hariri. The comments came after they met with Secretary General of the Future movement, Ahmed Hariri, who reiterated his party's support for a prisoner swap to end the more than 4-month ordeal. The relatives of the policemen and soldiers were being held by ISIS and Nusra militants since August said they were ready to go to Riyadh to meet Hariri at his home to seek his help in resolving the crisis. The families of the kidnapped soldiers expressed hope that the government will reach a clear decision on who would take the lead in negotiations, noting that the abundance of actors involved in the case has made it more complex than ever. The families also said that a figure involved in mediation had assured them that the militants will not kill any more of the hostages for the time being. The cabinet has convened in the absence of 4 key ministers in a session which is not expected to produce any decision on controversial files, including the licensing of new faculties, telecom and waste. Absentees included Future Movement ministers Nuhad al-Mashnouk and Ashraf Rifi, who were in Saudi Arabia for meetings with Future Movement leader Saad al-Hariri. Foreign Minister Gibran Basil and Telecommunications Minister Boutros Harib were also out of the country on official visits. Minister of Education Lias Boussab ruled out any chance of progress towards an agreement on approving requests by certain universities to establish new faculties, hinting that the issue has become a political one rather than related to educational concerns. The 72-item agenda did not include the divisive telecom file, still awaiting agreement on the bid document listing the criteria for the next call for tenders that will attract new companies to manage the sector. The sources said the issue of the captive servicemen in the hands of ISIS and Nusra Front would be present as usual, though from outside the agenda. Palestinian leader Mahmoud Abbas says he supports further negotiations over a draft resolution on ending Israel's occupation of Palestinian lands that was submitted by Jordan to the UN Security Council for a possible vote. The resolution wants Israeli security forces withdrawn no later than the end of 2017. Palestinian UN Ambassador Riyad Mansour said the Arab-backed resolution does not close the door on further negotiations on the issue, including with the United States. Jordan submitted the resolution on behalf of the Palestinians since Palestine is an observer to the UN and not a full member state. Only member states can present a resolution to the Security Council. Still in the Middle East, jihadists who have since joined the Islamic State group claim twin murders of secular politicians that plunged Tunisia into crisis in 2013 in a video posted online. It was not clear where the video was filmed, but a militant named Abu Muqatil claimed they were in an area under the control of ISIS, which has seized swaths of Syria and Iraq. "We are going to come back and kill several of you. You will not have a quiet life until Tunisia implements Islamic law," added the militant, whose real name is Abu Bakr al-Hakim. Belaid was killed on February the 6th of last year, while Brahmi was murdered on July the 25th in twin attacks blamed by the authorities on the jihadist Ansar Sharia group that has not previously been claimed. The killing of Belaid triggered deadly protests and a political crisis that brought down Islamist Prime Minister Hamadi Jbali. The murder of Brahmi intensified the crisis and threatened to derail Tunisia's post-Arab Spring transition until a compromise government was formed in January this year. And coming up next, Cuban President Raul Castro urges Washington to lift the 5-decade-long embargo against his country. More after the break. Welcome back. Cuban President Raul Castro has hailed the mutual decision to reestablish the U.S.-Cuban diplomatic relations, but urged Washington to lift the 5-decade-long embargo against his country. On Wednesday, the countries agreed to restore diplomatic ties that were severed more than 50 years ago, and U.S. President Barack Obama called for an end to the economic embargo against his Cold War enemy. The reestablishment of diplomatic ties was accompanied by Cuba's release of American aid worker Alan Gross and the swap of an unnamed U.S. intelligence officer held in Cuba for 3 Cuban jails in Florida. In a speech delivered at the White House, Obama also thanked Pope Francis, who assisted in the thaw in relations by pressing for the release of Alan Gross.
The United States of America is changing its relationship with the people of Cuba. In the most significant changes in our policy in more than 50 years, we will end an outdated approach that for decades has failed to advance our interests, and instead we will begin to normalize relations between our two countries. Over many months, my administration has held discussions with the Cuban government about Alan's case and other aspects of our relationship. His Holiness Pope Francis issued a personal appeal to me and to Cuba's President Raul Castro, urging us to resolve Alan's case and to address Cuba's interest in the release of 3 Cuban agents who've been jailed in the United States for over 15 years. Today, Alan returned home, reunited with his family at long last. Alan was released by the Cuban government on humanitarian grounds. Separately, in exchange for the 3 Cuban agents, Cuba today released one of the most important intelligence agents that the United States has ever had in Cuba, and who has been imprisoned for nearly 2 decades. This man, whose sacrifice has been known to only a few, provided America with the information that allowed us to arrest the network of Cuban agents that included the men transferred to Cuba today, as well as other spies in the United States. This man is now safely on our shores. I've instructed Secretary Kerry to immediately begin discussions with Cuba to reestablish diplomatic relations that have been severed since January of 1961. Going forward, the United States will reestablish an embassy in Havana, and high-ranking officials will visit Cuba. Where we can advance shared interests, we will, on issues like health, migration, counterterrorism, drug trafficking, and disaster response.
The breakthrough in U.S.-Cuban relations is prompting strong reactions among the Cuban-American populations in the United States, but also in the international community.
This news is very positive. Normalize their bilateral relations. In that regard, I heartily welcome today's development. I sincerely hope that these measures, this announcement, will help to expand further the exchanges between the two peoples who have been separated quite a long time. United Nations stands ready to help both countries to cultivate their good neighborly relations.
I think it's great. I think, interacting and trading and stuff with Cuba, we will look forward to, getting back a lot of our Cuban heritage and going to see our family will be easier, and I think it's great.
I think it's great. It's about time. The embargo was a fiasco. It was just giving Castro an excuse for all the shortcomings that they had in Cuba.
Colombia's FARC rebels have declared an indefinite unilateral ceasefire to start on the 20th of this month, saying they will only use weapons if they came under attack by the army. The FARC have repeatedly called for a bilateral ceasefire as part of the ongoing peace process. Last month, FARC freed an army general and 2 other hostages they had captured, paving the way for peace talks to resume. President Juan Manuel Santos had halted peace negotiations in the Cuban capital, Havana, after the rebels seized 5 hostages, including General Rubén Darío Alzate. The move disrupted efforts to stop Latin America's longest-running war that has killed more than 200,000 people since 1964. The suspension of talks was the most serious setback to peace efforts after months of discussions and partial accords. Moving on to Europe, Russian President Vladimir Putin has called for a political solution for the crisis in Ukraine, despite his anti-Western rhetoric. Putin said Ukraine must remain one political entity, meaning that its pro-Russia, rebellious eastern regions should not break away. Speaking at his annual news conference, the Russian president also suggested the Ukrainian government and rebels in eastern Ukraine should conduct a quick all-for-all prisoner swap before Christmas. He urged the Ukrainian government to fulfill its end of a peace deal reached in September, grant amnesty to the rebels and offer broad rights to eastern residents. Putin accused the West of trying to infringe on Russia's sovereignty, adding that the Ukrainian crisis was just a pretext for Western action. He also attempted to assuage fears of economic collapse and promised rapid recovery as he faced hundreds of journalists amid the worst financial crisis of his rule. And now for some news around the world. In brief, the European Union has imposed additional sanctions on Crimea, banning all investment and restricting trade to enforce the message the bloc will not recognize Russia's illegal annexation of Ukrainian territory. Australian Prime Minister Tony Abbott has admitted Sydney's cafe siege was a horrific wake-up call as details emerged of the final minutes of the standoff, which left the gunman and 2 hostages dead. Abbott had ordered an urgent inquiry into the circumstances surrounding the tragedy, and wide-range self-styled Islamic cleric Man Harun Moniz was not under surveillance, given his history of extremism and violence. Japan's meteorological agency has called on people to exercise more caution after 3 people died across the nation as a low-pressure system dumped heavy snows in some parts of Japan and triggered a tidal surge flood in others. At least 2 people died while shoveling heavy snow, according to Kyodo news agency, while another died in a pile-up caused by snow on the road. And still in the region, a flight from Seoul, South Korea, originally scheduled to land in Texas, was diverted to Narita, Japan for an emergency landing after being hit by extreme turbulence that injured several on board. The chaos on the flight was captured on a smartphone by a passenger on board. Several passengers and crew members were given medical attention upon landing in Tokyo. Check it out.
Family. I love my family very much. Everybody, please.
That looks pretty scary. This marks the end of our bulletin for today. Now for a reminder of our headlines. Families of the 25 captive Lebanese servicemen welcomed the support of the Future movement, saying they were prepared to travel to Saudi Arabia to meet with former Prime Minister Saad Hariri. The cabinet convenes in the absence of 4 key ministers in a session not expected to produce any decision on controversial files, including the licensing of new faculties, telecom and waste. And finally, Palestinian leader Mahmoud Abbas says he supports further negotiations over a draft resolution on ending Israel's occupation of Palestinian lands submitted to the UN Security Council for a possible vote. Those are your Thursday headlines from us here at Future Television. I'm Linda Tamim, and I'll see you again tomorrow for more updates. Don't miss it.
يجب أن يستقيل في الساعات القادمة 20 أكتوبر 2020.